The research outpost floated silently on the edge of known space, a gleaming structure framed by the swirling lights of a distant nebula. Inside, Elias Kane adjusted his datapad as he reviewed the latest energy readings. The anomaly they'd been tracking for weeks was intensifying, emitting strange pulses from a dying star. Whatever was happening, it wasn't natural, and it was spreading. Elias sighed, running a hand through his short, dark hair. Another dead end, he muttered to himself, staring at the screen. Frustrating, isn't it? A voice interrupted, melodic yet firm. Elias turned to see a figure standing at the entrance of the observation room. Her appearance was striking, pale, luminous skin that shimmered faintly under the artificial lights, and eyes that seemed to hold an entire galaxy within them. "Can I help you?" Elias asked, setting his datapad aside. The woman stepped forward, her movements fluid, almost ethereal. "I am Elira of the Elthean delegation. I was sent to collaborate on the anomaly investigation." Elias straightened, offering his hand. Elias Kane, human representative and astrophysicist. Elira regarded his hand for a moment, then placed her slender fingers into his, her touch cool but firm. "A pleasure to meet you, Elias Kane." "The pleasure is mine," he replied, then gestured to the station's main console. "I assume your people received our preliminary data?" "Yes," Elira said, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "Your findings are intriguing, though incomplete. The phenomenon appears to be disrupting hyperspace routes near our territories as well." Elias nodded, his frustration returning. "We've been trying to trace the origin of the pulses, but they're unpredictable. It's like chasing shadows." "Perhaps," Elira replied, stepping closer to the console, "but shadows can reveal much if observed from the right angle." Elias smirked, impressed by her confidence. "Let's see if your perspective helps. Care to join me?" Elira nodded, and they began working side by side. Elias explained his team's methodology while Elira introduced her own people's advanced sensors, which she claimed could map energy patterns on a quantum level. "Your technology is elegant," Elias admitted after watching Elira manipulate a holographic interface that projected the star's energy pulses in intricate detail. "And yours is admirably robust," Elira replied, her lips curving into a faint smile. "Perhaps together, they will uncover the answers we seek." As the hours passed, the two found themselves engaged in animated discussions. Elira's approach was methodical and deeply tied to her species' understanding of energy as a living force, while Elias relied on mathematical models and logical deductions. Their methods often clashed, but ultimately complemented each other. "Wait," Elias said, leaning over the console. "If we overlay your energy patterns with my trajectory models, we might pinpoint the source of the pulses." Elira tilted her head, considering his suggestion. "An interesting idea. Let's try it." Their hands moved in unison across the console, their focus so intense that they didn't notice how close they'd become. When the overlay was complete, a small region near the star lit up, a potential source. "There," Elias exclaimed, pointing at the map. "That's our starting point." Elira turned to him, her face illuminated by the glow of the hologram. "Impressive, Elias Kane. Your insight is unique." "Call me Elias," he said, grinning. "And thanks. Couldn't have done it without your elegant tech." Elira chuckled softly, a sound that reminded Elias of wind chimes. "Perhaps we are a stronger team than I expected." Their breakthrough brought a sense of accomplishment, but the mystery of the pulses loomed large. Elira suggested they observe the anomaly firsthand using her ship, which was equipped to handle the star's intense radiation. "Are you sure it's safe?" Elias asked, his brows furrowing. "Safe enough," Elira replied, her confidence unwavering. "Do you trust me?" Elias hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "I guess I do." They agreed to prepare for the mission the next day. As Elira turned to leave, Elias called out to her. "Elira, one more thing." She paused, looking back. "Yes. Thanks for showing up," Elias said, his voice earnest. "I didn't think anyone could help us crack this." Elira's expression softened, a flicker of warmth crossing her usually composed face. "Thank you for welcoming me. Together, we might solve more than this anomaly." As the doors slid shut behind her, Elias leaned against the console, his mind buzzing. Elira was unlike anyone he'd met, brilliant, enigmatic, and undeniably captivating. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he felt a strange certainty that he wasn't facing them alone. The human pulse and the alien spark, he murmured to himself, a faint smile on his lips. Together in the cosmos. Chapter 2. The mystery of the pulse. The following day, Elias stood in the docking bay, staring up at Elira's spacecraft. Sleek and silver, its surface shimmered as though alive, reflecting the soft glow of the station's artificial lights. It dwarfed the utilitarian vessels used by humans, exuding a sense of elegance and advanced technology that made him feel both impressed and slightly inadequate. Elira approached from behind, her steps almost silent. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" she asked, her melodic voice cutting through his thoughts. Elias turned, flashing her a grin. "It makes our ships look like tin cans." She raised a delicate brow. "Perhaps, but functionality is what matters. Your ships are sturdy, built for endurance. That is admirable." "Flattery will get you everywhere," Elias quipped, earning a small smile from her. She motioned toward the ship. "Shall we?" Once inside, Elias found himself awestruck. The interior was an intricate blend of form and function. Panels of glowing symbols lined the walls, and the air was scented faintly with something floral and calming. "This is incredible," Elias said, running his fingers over one of the smooth surfaces. "How does it all work?" Elira tilted her head, studying him. "Would you like a brief lesson?" "Absolutely," Elias replied, stepping closer. She guided him to the central control panel, a translucent interface that shimmered when she touched it. "Our technology relies on the manipulation of energy fields. These symbols," she gestured to the glowing glyphs, "are not merely decorative. They interact with the systems and allow us to command a ship with precision." "Interactive glyphs? That's brilliant," Elias said, leaning in to get a closer look. "Do they respond to anyone?" "No," Elira replied, her tone patient. "They are tuned to Elthean energy signatures. However, I can modify them temporarily to allow your input. Would you like to try?" Elias's eyes widened. "You're serious?" She nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Place your hand here." Elias hesitated before placing his palm against the glowing surface. He felt a subtle warmth, like standing in sunlight, and watched in fascination as the glyphs shifted under his touch. "That's incredible," he murmured. "It feels alive." Elira nodded. "In many ways it is. Our ships are not merely machines. They are extensions of ourselves." Elias pulled his hand back reluctantly. "You're making it hard for me to go back to human tech after this." Elira chuckled softly. "Perhaps one day, your people will create similar advancements." After the brief tutorial, Elira led him to the ship's observation deck. The floor was transparent, offering a stunning view of the star they were investigating. Pulses of light radiated from its surface, spreading across the void in rhythmic waves. "This is it," Elias said, leaning against the railing. "The source of the anomaly." Elira stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the star. "It is dying," she said softly, "but its final moments are unlike anything we've seen before." Elias nodded. "These pulses, they're disrupting hyperspace routes near both our territories. If they intensify, it could cut off travel entirely. Or worse," Elira added, "they could destabilize the surrounding systems." The gravity of the situation hung between them as they analyzed the data. Elira projected a holographic map of the pulse's spread, overlaying it with Elias's trajectory models. "The patterns suggest an external interference," Elira said, tracing a line on the map. "Something is amplifying the star's energy." Elias frowned. "But what? A natural phenomenon? Or an artificial source?" Elira finished, her tone serious. They worked for hours, piecing together fragments of data. Elias admired how seamlessly they collaborated, their minds aligning despite their different approaches. "Here," Elira said, highlighting a cluster of signals near the star's core. "This anomaly, it does not match the star's natural energy signature. It is foreign." Elias leaned closer, studying the projection. "You're right. It's like a ripple in the fabric of space-time." Elira's gaze shifted to him. "We must investigate further, but the radiation near the core is intense. It will require careful planning." Elias straightened, determination in his eyes. "Then let's plan. We're not leaving this unsolved." Elira nodded, her expression softening. "I appreciate your resolve, Elias. Few would be so willing to face such unknowns." He smiled, a hint of humor in his voice. "Well, I'm not known for playing it safe." "Clearly," she replied, her lips curving into a rare smile. As they finalized their preparations, Elias found himself glancing at Elira more often. Her calm demeanor and sharp intellect were captivating, but it was her quiet passion for uncovering the truth that resonated with him most. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Elira asked suddenly, catching him off guard. Elias chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Just wondering how someone like you ended up out here, risking everything for answers." Elira hesitated, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps for the same reason you did. Curiosity. A desire to understand the unknown." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the room seemed to shrink around them. Elias broke the silence with a lopsided grin. "Well, here's to curiosity, then." "To curiosity," Elira echoed, her voice warm. As they stood on the edge of discovery, the dying star pulsing before them, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this journey was about more than just solving a mystery. It was about connection, between species, between minds, and perhaps between hearts. Chapter 3. Shadows of the Unknown. The hum of Elira's ship filled the cabin as it cut through the vacuum of space toward the pulsating star. Elias sat at a console, his eyes darting between screens displaying radiation levels and spatial readings. The closer they got, the more erratic the data became. Elira was at the helm, her fingers gliding effortlessly across the glowing glyphs. Her movements were precise, almost instinctual, as if the ship responded to her thoughts. "Radiation levels are spiking again," Elias said, frowning at the display. "We're pushing this ship pretty hard." "It can handle it," Elira assured him. "This vessel is designed for environments far harsher than this." "I'll take your word for it," Elias replied, leaning back in his chair. "But I'd rather not find out what its limits are." Elira's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then let's ensure we avoid that outcome. The data from this approach will help us determine if the interference is artificial or natural." Elias tapped a few keys on his console, overlaying their trajectory with the star's pulse patterns. "We're heading straight for the densest part of the field. If anything's hiding in there, we'll find it." The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the ship entered the outer edges of the radiation belt. A cascade of colors filled the viewports, a mesmerizing dance of energy waves. Elias stared in awe, momentarily forgetting the dangers they faced. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. Elira glanced at him, her expression softening. "It is. Stars in their final stages often release their most vibrant displays. It's as if they're saying farewell." "Poetic," Elias remarked, his tone tinged with admiration. "I didn't peg you as a poet." "Perhaps you don't know me well enough yet," she replied, a hint of playfulness in her voice. The moment was interrupted by a sharp alarm from the console. Elias snapped back to attention, his fingers flying over the controls. "We've got an energy spike, big one. It's coming from near the star's core." Elira's brow furrowed as she adjusted the ship's sensors. "That is no natural fluctuation. Something is amplifying the star's energy output." "An amplifier?" "Not here," Elias asked, skepticism creeping into his voice. "Who or what would do that?" "Many civilizations have reasons to manipulate stars," Elira said. "Energy harvesting, scientific experimentation, even territorial claims." "Territorial claims," Elias muttered. "Because nothing says, 'This is mine,' like weaponizing a star." Elira didn't respond, her focus locked on the data. The ship's systems began to map the source of the interference, pinpointing a small metallic structure orbiting dangerously close to the core. "There," Elira said, highlighting the structure on the display. "That is no natural formation." Elias leaned closer, studying the image. "Looks like some kind of station. But who would build something this close to a dying star?" "Whoever they are, their actions are destabilizing this region," Elira said. "We must investigate further." The ship approached the structure cautiously, its shields absorbing the increasing radiation. As they drew nearer, Elias felt a growing sense of unease. "This place is abandoned," he said, scanning for life signs. "No heat signatures, no power signals beyond the amplification field. It's like someone set this up and left. Or something drove them away," Elira suggested. Elias shot her a look. Comforting thought. The ship's proximity sensors activated as they closed in on the station. It was a spindly, skeletal structure, its surface blackened by radiation. Glowing conduits snaked across its surface, pulsing in rhythm with the star's energy waves. "This technology, it's unfamiliar," Elira said, her voice tinged with curiosity. "It doesn't match any known species in this sector." "Great," Elias muttered. "Mysterious tech, abandoned station, dying star. We're ticking all the boxes for a bad sci-fi thriller." Elira raised an eyebrow. Do you always respond to danger with humor? Only when I'm nervous, Elias admitted. They brought the ship to a halt, locking it in orbit a safe distance from the station. Elira prepared a remote drone to gather samples and data while Elias analyzed the star's behavior. These conduits, Elias said, pointing at the holographic projection of the station. They're not just amplifying the energy, they're channeling it. But where? Elira manipulated the display, tracing the energy pathways. If this station is a conduit, the energy must have a destination. But it's impossible to tell from this distance. Then we need to get closer, Elias said. Elira glanced at him, her expression unreadable. That is risky. The radiation levels near the station are unstable. Elias smirked. I thought your ship could handle it. It can, she said, her tone firm. But I am more concerned about us. The sincerity in her words caught Elias off guard. He met her gaze, seeing something in her eyes he hadn't noticed before. Concern, not just as a colleague, but as someone who cared. Well, Elias said after a moment, if we don't figure this out, it won't matter. Let's take the risk. Elira nodded, her composure returning. Very well. But proceed with caution, Elias. As they prepared to deploy the drone, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something far greater than they'd anticipated. The star's pulse seemed to echo in his chest, a reminder of the fragile balance between discovery and danger. Elira, he said quietly, whatever we find out here, thanks for having my back. She looked at him, a small smile gracing her lips. Always, Elias. As the ship drifted closer to the station, the pulse of the star grew louder, a cosmic heartbeat that seemed to mirror the tension in the air. Whatever lay ahead, Elias and Elira knew they would face it together, their connection growing stronger with each passing moment. Chapter 4: Echoes of the Cosmos. The journey back from the dying star to Elira's homeworld was marked by an air of subdued determination. The data they'd gathered pointed to a mystery far greater than either had anticipated, but answers would have to wait until they reached Elira's crystalline planet. Her people's archives contained ancient knowledge that might provide context for the strange amplification they had uncovered. As the ship descended through the shimmering atmosphere, Elias leaned forward, mesmerized by the view. The cities below sparkled like jewels, their structures made of materials that refracted light into dazzling colors. Rivers of liquid light wound through the landscape, glowing softly in the planet's perpetual twilight. Your world is breathtaking, Elias said, his voice tinged with awe. Elira glanced at him, her expression softening. Thank you. I often forget how remarkable it is until I see it through new eyes. The ship landed smoothly on a platform suspended over a vast, glowing lake. Waiting for them was an elder of Elira's people, her skin even more luminous than Elira's, with intricate patterns that shifted subtly as she moved. Welcome home, Elira, the elder said, her tone warm but formal. Her gaze shifted to Elias. And you must be the human companion she spoke of. Elias Kane, he said, bowing his head slightly in greeting. Thank you for having me. The elder's eyes glimmered with approval. Elira has chosen wisely. Elias raised an eyebrow, shooting a questioning glance at Elira, who quickly changed the subject. We need access to the archives, Elder Sile. Our findings near the star may relate to the ancient records. Of course, Sile said. You may begin your search immediately. They made their way to the archives, a towering structure of translucent spires that seemed to hum faintly with stored energy. Inside, shelves of glowing crystals lined the walls, each containing the encoded knowledge of Elira's people. Your archives make Earth's libraries look like caves with drawings, Elias said, marveling at the technology. Elira smiled faintly. These crystals hold millennia of our history. Let us hope they hold the answers we seek. Together, they began their search, scanning the archives for any mention of the amplification technology they had encountered. As the hours passed, Elias couldn't help but notice how Elira's demeanor softened in this familiar environment. She was more relaxed, her usual precision tempered by a quiet sense of belonging. You seem different here, Elias said, breaking the silence. Elira looked up from the crystal she was examining. Different how? Lighter, Elias said, struggling to find the right word. Like you're more yourself. Elira considered this, her gaze thoughtful. Perhaps it is because I am home. This place is a part of me, just as your Earth is a part of you. Elias nodded, understanding. It's easy to forget that sometimes being out there. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from Elira's console. I found something, she said, her voice sharpening with focus. Elias moved to her side as she projected the crystal's contents into the air. The holographic display showed intricate diagrams of a device similar to the station they had discovered, accompanied by text in Elira's native language. This speaks of an ancient experiment, Elira explained, translating as she read. Our ancestors sought to harness the energy of stars for interstellar travel. They created conduits to channel and amplify the energy, but the process was unstable. How unstable? Elias asked, his brow furrowing. Catastrophic, Elira said. The experiment was abandoned, and the technology was scattered to prevent its misuse. Elias let out a low whistle. Looks like someone found it again. It seems so, Elira agreed. But the question remains, who and why? As they delved deeper into the archives, the connection between the ancient technology and the current anomaly became clearer. Whoever had reactivated the conduit was not only destabilizing the star, but risking a chain reaction that could affect neighboring systems. This isn't just about one star, Elias said, leaning back in his chair. If this spreads, it could disrupt entire trade routes, even colonies. Which is why we must act quickly, Elira said. But first, we need to know more. They worked late into the night, their shared determination driving them forward. When they finally emerged from the archives, the city was aglow with its natural light, casting long, soft shadows. Elira led Elias to a quiet garden overlooking the luminous lake. The air was filled with the soft hum of energy and the faint scent of flowering plants. They sat in companionable silence, the weight of their discovery settling over them. This is bigger than us, Elias said after a while, his voice quiet. But I feel like we're meant to do this. Together. Elira turned to him, her expression unreadable. Why do you say that? Elias hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know. Maybe it's just a gut feeling. Or maybe it's the fact that every step of this has brought us closer, not just to answers, but to each other. Elira studied him for a long moment, then smiled. The human pulse and the alien spark, she said softly, echoing the phrase he had used before. Together in the cosmos. Elias smiled back, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the glowing lake. Yeah, together. As they sat beneath the glowing sky, the path ahead seemed daunting but clear. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew they would face them side by side, their connection a guiding force in the vast, unpredictable expanse of the cosmos. Chapter 5, The Spark of Passion. The days following their discovery in Elira's archives were filled with intense preparation. Elias and Elira had developed a plan to return to the star and shut down the amplification device before it caused irreversible damage. However, their collaboration required trust, precision, and an unspoken bond that had grown stronger with every moment spent together. That evening, after hours of work, Elias found himself standing on the balcony of Elira's quarters, gazing out over the glowing city. The shimmering lake below reflected the gentle light of the crystalline structures, creating a scene of serene beauty. He heard the soft sound of Elira's footsteps approaching. Couldn't sleep, she asked, her voice soft as she joined him. Elias shook his head, offering her a faint smile. Too much on my mind. And honestly, this view doesn't make it easy to shut off. Elira leaned on the railing beside him, her luminous skin glowing faintly in the twilight. It is calming, though. A reminder of what we are trying to protect. Elias glanced at her, his gaze lingering. You got a way of seeing things, Elira. Grounding. She tilted her head, studying him. And you, Elias, have a way of pushing forward even when the odds are uncertain. It's something I admire. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to still. The tension of the past days melted into something softer, something unspoken but deeply felt. You know, Elias said, breaking the silence, this whole journey, it's been unexpected. In a good way. Elira smiled, a small, genuine expression that lit up her features. I feel the same. Working with you has been different. Different good or different bad? Elias teased, leaning slightly closer. Different, extraordinary, Elira replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The space between them seemed to disappear as their gazes locked. Tentatively, Elias reached out, brushing a strand of her silken hair away from her face. Her breath hitched, her glowing eyes searching his for a moment before she closed the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that started gentle, exploring, but quickly deepened as they gave in to the connection that had been building for so long. Elias cupped her face, his fingers tracing the delicate lines of her skin, while Elira's hands found their way to his shoulders, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Elira rested her forehead against his. "This feels right," she said softly. "It does," Elias agreed, his voice warm. "Like it was meant to happen." Elira's glowing fingers traced the edge of his jaw, her touch sending a shiver down his spine. "Elias, I don't know what the future holds, but in this moment, I want to be here with you." He smiled, pulling her into his arms. "I couldn't ask for anything more." They moved inside, the quiet intimacy of the moment following them. Elira guided him to a low couch surrounded by soft, glowing cushions. They sat together, their conversation flowing effortlessly as they shared stories of their worlds, their pasts, and their hopes for the future. Elira reached out, her fingers intertwining with his. "You humans have a way of finding light, even in the darkest places. It's something I've come to admire." Elias chuckled, his thumb brushing over her hand. "And you Elfians, you're like that light. You remind us why it's worth searching for." The connection between them deepened as they continued to talk, their words giving way to touches and glances that spoke volumes. Eventually, Elira leaned in, pressing her lips to his once more. This time, their kiss was slower, more deliberate, as if savoring the moment. Elias gently guided her into his lap, his hands resting on her waist as she straddled him. Her luminous skin glowed brighter, reflecting the intensity of their shared emotion. She trembled slightly, her breath catching as his hands roamed her back, pulling her closer. "You're trembling," he whispered, his lips brushing against her ear. She smiled, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "Because I've never felt anything like this before." Their kisses grew deeper, their movements synchronized as they explored the intimacy that had been building between them. Elira's hands moved to his chest, tracing the lines of his muscles, while Elias pressed kisses along her jawline and down her neck, eliciting soft, melodic sighs from her. They made their way to the bed, their touches becoming more urgent yet still filled with tenderness. As they lay together, the glowing lights of the city outside casting a warm hue over them, they discovered a new language of connection, one that transcended words and bridged the gap between their worlds. When the night finally quieted, Elira lay curled against Elias, her head resting on his chest. His hands stroked her hair gently as they basked in the aftermath of their shared moment. "The human pulse and the alien spark," Elira murmured, her voice drowsy but content. "Together in the cosmos." Elias smiled, kissing the top of her head. "Together," he echoed. As they drifted into sleep, the bond they had formed felt unbreakable, a union of two beings from vastly different worlds finding unity in their shared humanity, or perhaps something even greater. In that moment, the cosmos seemed smaller, and the connection they shared infinite. Chapter 6. The Heart of the Problem. The tranquil glow of Elira's planet faded into the void of space as her ship departed, carrying Elias and her toward the star that had become the center of their mystery. This time, their mission was clear: shut down the amplification device before it destabilized the surrounding systems. The stakes were high, but Elias felt a renewed determination, grounded by the connection he and Elira now shared. Elias adjusted his seat, staring at the data scrolling across the console. "Radiation levels are spiking faster than before," he said, his voice steady but concerned. "We're heading into a hot zone." Elira, seated at the helm, manipulated the glowing glyphs with practiced precision. "The ship's shields can handle it for now. I've recalibrated them to filter out the star's energy pulses." Elias nodded, glancing at her. Despite the gravity of their mission, there was a calm confidence about Elira that put him at ease. "How are you always so composed? You don't even flinch." Elira's lips curved into a faint smile. "Composure is a habit, not an inherent trait. Besides, I trust you to handle the unexpected." "Well, that's a lot of faith in a guy who didn't even know what half your ship's controls did a week ago," Elias replied, smirking. "You're a fast learner," Elira said, glancing at him briefly, "and more adaptable than you give yourself credit for." Their banter lightened the tension as the ship approached the amplification device, now visible on their monitors. It loomed in the void, a skeletal structure pulsing with unnatural light. Energy conduits snaked across its surface, channeling the star's power into something Elias couldn't yet understand. "That thing is bigger than I thought," Elias muttered, leaning forward to study the display. "And it's still active." Elira's hands moved deftly across the controls. The amplification is increasing exponentially. If we don't deactivate it soon, the resulting energy surge could affect hyperspace corridors for light years. Elias exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing. Then let's figure out how to shut it down. What's the plan? Elira activated a holographic projection of the device, highlighting key sections. The conduits are the main focus. If we sever the connections here and here, she pointed to two glowing nodes, the amplification process will collapse. Simple enough, Elias said, though his tone betrayed his skepticism. But I'm guessing there's a catch. Elira nodded. The device's failsafe mechanisms will likely activate once we start disrupting its systems. We'll need to work quickly. Elias cracked his knuckles, his trademark grin returning. Fast is my middle name. Is it? Elira asked, her expression amused. Well, no, Elias admitted. But it sounds good, doesn't it? Elira chuckled softly, her rare laugh a welcome reprieve from the tension. Let's focus, Elias. As the ship neared the device, Elira initiated a remote drone equipped with tools for dismantling the conduits. Elias monitored the operation, his fingers flying over the console as he tracked the drone's progress. The first node is coming up, Elias said, his voice tightening with concentration. Are you ready? Always, Elira replied, her hands steady on the controls. The drone latched onto the first conduit, its precision tools slicing through the glowing energy lines. Sparks erupted as the connection severed, and the device shuddered, emitting a low hum. That's one down, Elias said, relief in his voice. What's next? Elira's gaze sharpened as alarms began blaring on the console. Failsafe mechanisms activating. The device is attempting to reroute the energy. Elias cursed under his breath, quickly analyzing the data. It's trying to stabilize itself. We've got to move faster. The drone maneuvered to the second node, but the energy surges grew more erratic, causing turbulence that rocked the ship. Elias grabbed onto the edge of the console for support. This thing's fighting us. Elira's voice remained calm. Hold steady. The shields are absorbing most of the impact. The drone reached the second node and began severing the connections, but the energy buildup intensified. The ship's lights flickered as the system struggled to compensate. Come on, Elias muttered, his eyes glued to the monitor. Almost there. Finally, the second conduit snapped, and the amplification device let out a final deafening pulse before falling silent. The turbulence ceased, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. We did it, Elias said, leaning back in his chair with a relieved sigh. The energy output is dropping. Elira nodded, her fingers dancing across the controls as she confirmed the results. The device is fully deactivated. The star's energy levels are stabilizing. Elias turned to her, a wide grin spreading across his face. You're amazing, you know that? Elira raised an eyebrow, her expression softening. It was a joint effort. Still, Elias said, his tone genuine. I couldn't have done this without you. Elira met his gaze, a hint of warmth in her glowing eyes. Nor I without you, Elias. As they prepared to leave the star's orbit, Elias couldn't help but feel a surge of pride, not just in their success, but in the partnership they had forged. Despite their differences, they had worked together seamlessly, their bond growing stronger with each challenge. The human pulse and the alien spark, Elias said, echoing the words that had come to define their journey. Together in the cosmos. Elira smiled, her voice soft but firm. Together. As the ship turned toward home, the vastness of space stretched before them, filled with endless possibilities. Their mission wasn't over, but for the first time, Elias felt certain that whatever lay ahead, they would face it as one. Chapter 7, Fusion of Worlds. The aftermath of their mission to disable the amplification device left Elias and Elira both exhilarated and exhausted. The star's pulse had returned to its natural rhythm, and the danger of destabilization had passed. However, their work was far from over. The remnants of the mysterious technology still needed investigation, and the potential origins of its creators posed new questions. Back at the research station, Elias leaned over a holographic display, poring over the schematics of the now dormant device. Elira stood beside him, her glowing hands navigating a separate interface, analyzing the energy patterns they had recorded. This architecture is unlike anything we've encountered, Elira said, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. The design is efficient, yet crude in certain aspects. It feels unfinished. Elias nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, like whoever built it wasn't done testing it. But the question is, why leave it here? This kind of tech doesn't get abandoned without a good reason. Or a dangerous one, Elira added, glancing at him. Do you believe this was deliberate sabotage or simply negligence? Hard to say, Elias admitted. Could be either. But what worries me is the potential for others to find this and misuse it. Elira frowned, her fingers pausing midair. Then we must ensure its remnants are either secured or destroyed. Elias smirked. You sound like you're ready to lead a cleanup operation. And you sound like you're ready to follow, Elira countered, her lips curving into a faint smile. Their banter was interrupted by a chime from the console. A message had arrived from Elira's homeworld, requesting an immediate update on their findings. She moved to answer it, leaving Elias to his thoughts. As he waited, Elias stared at the hologram of the star. It pulsed steadily now, its fiery surface calmer than when they had first encountered it. He couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come, from strangers with a common goal to partners who trusted each other implicitly. When Elira returned, her expression was thoughtful. The Council wishes for us to present our findings directly. They believe this technology's origins may tie to events in their distant history. Sounds like a big deal, Elias said, leaning back against the console. You okay with that? Elira tilted her head, studying him. It is an opportunity to ensure our efforts are understood and supported. But I will not speak alone. You will join me. Elias blinked, caught off guard. Me? I'm just the human sidekick in this operation. Elira stepped closer, her luminous eyes fixed on his. You are no sidekick, Elias. Your contributions have been invaluable. You belong in this conversation as much as I do. Her words settled over him like a weight and a gift. All right, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. Let's do this. The council chamber on Elira's homeworld was an awe-inspiring sight. Its walls shimmered with holographic images of stars and galaxies, while the air hummed softly with the energy of the assembled Elfians. Elias stood beside Elira at the center of the room, feeling both out of place and strangely at home. Elira began the presentation, her voice steady and precise as she outlined the events leading to the discovery of the amplification device. Elias followed her lead, adding his perspective and insights where needed. The council members listened intently, their glowing eyes reflecting both concern and intrigue. When they finished, one of the elders spoke. You have done well to contain this threat. But the question remains, who built this device and what was their intent? Elira nodded. We are still investigating. However, the similarities to ancient Elfian design suggest that this may be a remnant of our past, a forgotten project, perhaps, or one abandoned for reasons we have yet to uncover. Elias stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Whatever its origins, we need to ensure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. If someone else were to reactivate it, the consequences could be catastrophic. The elder regarded him thoughtfully. And you, Elias Kane, what motivates you to join this effort? Your world is far removed from ours. Elias hesitated, then met the elder's gaze. Because this isn't just about one world or one species. The dangers we're facing don't care about boundaries or differences. They affect all of us. And I believe working together is the only way we're going to make it through. The chamber was silent for a moment before the elder nodded. Your words carry wisdom. The bond you and Elira share is a testament to what can be achieved when worlds unite. After the meeting, Elias and Elira stepped outside into the twilight of the crystalline city. The council had approved their proposal to secure the remnants of the device and begin a deeper investigation into its origins. That went better than I expected, Elias admitted, exhaling deeply. Elira glanced at him, her expression soft. You spoke well. The council respects sincerity, and you offer them exactly that. Elias grinned, his confidence returning. Guess I'm not so bad at this diplomacy thing after all. She laughed, a rare and genuine sound that made his chest feel lighter. No, you are not. They walked through the glowing streets in companionable silence, the weight of their mission temporarily lifted. As they reached the edge of a luminous garden, Elira turned to him, her glowing eyes meeting his. Elias, she said quietly, thank you for standing beside me today. It means more than I can express. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. In that moment, beneath the glowing sky of her homeworld, their connection felt unbreakable, a fusion of two worlds, two minds, and two hearts. Together, they had faced the unknown, and together, They would continue to uncover its secrets. Chapter 8, Together in the Cosmos. The Council's approval marked the beginning of a new chapter for Elias and Elira. Their mission to secure and dismantle the remnants of the amplification device had been a success, but the deeper mystery of its origins continued to draw them forward. Together, they worked to establish a dedicated research initiative on a neutral space station, an effort to prevent similar technology from threatening the fragile balance of the galaxy. The station, orbiting a tranquil binary star system, became a hub of activity. Researchers from multiple species gathered to share knowledge, each drawn by the promise of discovery and collaboration. Elias and Elira found themselves at the center of this effort, their partnership a symbol of what could be achieved when minds and hearts aligned. One evening, after a long day of coordinating research teams and reviewing findings, Elias sat on the observation deck, staring out at the binary stars. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the station systems. He held a cup of something warm in his hands, the steam curling lazily in the air. Elira entered, her steps light as she crossed the room to join him. She carried a datapad, its holographic display flickering faintly. "Still working?" Elias asked, a teasing grin on his face. "Always," Elira replied, though her tone was warm. She set the datapad down and took a seat beside him. "But even I need a moment to breathe." Elias chuckled, offering her his cup. "Here, it's human tea. Not as fancy as your glowing elixirs, but it does the trick." She accepted it with a small smile, taking a cautious sip. "Earthy, comforting, in a way." "Glad you think so," Elias said, leaning back in his chair. "You've been running yourself ragged. You deserve a break." Elira studied him for a moment, her gaze thoughtful. "As do you. You've taken on so much since this began, Elias. More than I think you realize." Elias shrugged, his eyes on the stars. "I guess I just feel like I'm finally doing something that matters. Something bigger than me." "It does matter," Elira said softly. "And so do you." Her words hung in the air, their weight unspoken but deeply felt. Elias turned to her, his expression serious. I've spent a lot of my life looking up at the stars, wondering what's out there. But I never imagined I'd find this." Elira tilted her head, her luminous eyes meeting his. "This." "You," Elias admitted, his voice quiet. "This connection. This a partnership." Elira's gaze softened, and she reached for his hand. Her touch was warm and steady, grounding him even as the vastness of space stretched out before them. "I never imagined it either. But I am grateful for it. For you." Elias smiled, his fingers tightening around hers. "So what's next for us? After all this?" Elira glanced at the stars, her expression contemplative. "We continue forward. Together. There is still so much to uncover, so much to learn. And perhaps, somewhere along the way, we find answers to questions we haven't yet asked." Elias chuckled. "You make it sound simple." "It is not," Elira said, her tone laced with humor. "But simplicity does not make something worthwhile." They sat in companionable silence, their hands still entwined, as the stars shifted slowly in the sky. The binary suns cast a soft glow over the room, their light reflecting off the walls and onto their faces. After a while, Elira spoke again. "Elias, do you remember what you said when we first began this journey?" "I said a lot of things," Elias replied, grinning. "You'll have to be more specific." Elira smiled, shaking her head. "You said, the human pulse and the alien spark, together in the cosmos." "I have thought about those words often." Elias's grin softened into something more genuine. "I meant them, I still do." Elira nodded, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "As do I. They are a reminder of what we can achieve, not just as individuals, but as something greater." Elias reached up, brushing a strand of her hair away from her face. "You're pretty great on your own, though." Elira laughed softly, leaning into his touch. "As are you, Elias Kane." They stayed like that for a while, the galaxy spinning quietly around them. In that moment, there were no pressing missions, no mysteries to unravel, only the quiet understanding that they were exactly where they were meant to be. As the observation deck dimmed, signaling the station's nighttime cycle, Elias and Elira stood, their hands still linked. Together, they left the room, ready to face whatever came next. In the infinite expanse of the cosmos, they had found something rare and extraordinary, a connection that transcended worlds, a partnership forged in discovery and trust. And as they walked side by side, their steps in perfect rhythm, the stars above seemed just a little closer, their light a little brighter.